So the bottom line is we are animals, and much of our sexuality is based in that, in our animalistic instinct.
Before we start, a small disclaimer. The Sex Doctors podcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice.
Welcome to the Sex Doctors, featuring Dr. Marianne Brandon, clinical psychologist and diplomate in sex therapy, and Dr. Abraham Morgentaler, renowned urologist and expert in sexual medicine and testosterone therapy. Together, they bring you expert insights into sex, intimacy, and relationships. Let's dive in.
I believe in miracles. Where from?
Hey, Dr. Brandon.
Hey, Dr. Morgentaler.
Nice to see you.
You too. I see you brought your cat.
He's just going to hang out while we talk.
That's awesome.
Until he gets tired of whatever it is we have to say. So listen, I thought we might talk about something that you've written about extensively, which is monogamy. There's so many couples that struggle with this.
For sure.
And more specifically, they struggle with it in the sense that somebody has cheated or is on the verge of cheating or is doing something that might be considered cheating.
Right.
And you wrote a book about this.
I did.
Called Monogamy, the Untold Story. There's a nice picture of a knot here, and it is a knotty subject, if we can use that word, no pun intended really, but K-N-O-T-T-Y.
Yeah.
So how you have a different approach to thinking about monogamy than I've heard before. I think you come at it from an evolutionary
That's right.
Side. So how do you think about monogamy as an issue?
My understanding of monogamy was formed after doing couples therapy for decades. And what I heard from people over and over again is, I can't believe I cheated. I love my partner. This is not who I thought I was. I want this marriage and I want this relationship or whatever. And they're shocked by sort of who they've become and how they didn't even understand themselves to be that way.
Yeah.
And so what I learned over time is that this is a very complex issue. So when I come at this from an evolutionary perspective, it's really only one piece of the puzzle. It's just a missing piece of the puzzle. So oftentimes when couples deal with these issues in therapy, this evolutionary piece is ignored, and that's a mistake, and it's disempowering for couples because you can't solve a problem you don't understand.
So when you say evolutionary piece, can you explain that?
So bottom line is we're primates. We're apes. That's what we are.
Excuse me? Me too?
You too. I'm sorry to break the news to you.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So the bottom line is we are animals, and much of our sexuality is based in that, in our animalistic instincts and in our ancient history of hundreds of thousands of years of evolving to be who we are. So in spite of what our cerebral cortex will say is an appropriate way or a desirable way to live, we still have instincts and impulses that don't follow our politically correct ideals. They're just there, and that's a part of being a human being. So managing monogamy means recognizing that those instincts exist and finding ways to work with them that aren't hurtful to your relationship or to your partner.
So so put that in the context of a couple where the guy, the woman has cheated.
Wow. So I would prefer to put it in the context of a relationship before anyone has cheated. Because after that has happened, there's so much very real pain and distress that it's very difficult to find this a helpful topic or a helpful concept. It is so hurtful. So before someone has cheated is really when couples need to have these kinds of conversations and talk about the fact that if monogamy is what they wish for, and that's what most people want. So about 4 or 5% of couples have a non-monogamous contract, but otherwise most people are aiming for monogamy.
Non-monogamous contract means
That means that both parties in the couple agree, assuming there's two parties in the couple, they agree that they can step out under whatever circumstances.
4%.
4 to 5. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah. So most people are aiming for monogamy, and monogamy means, for most people, it means one partner, their exclusive relationship partner, is who they're having emotional and sexual intimacy with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, straying is pretty common, right?
Oh, it's quite common.
Yeah.
Yeah, about a third of people is generally what I say. It's hard to get really good stats on that. We should do a show soon about that. It's hard to get really good stats because people lie about it and people define it differently. Right. But I generally tell people about a third of people have affairs. Yeah. And about half of marriages end. When you put the stats together, 20% of couples are sexless, about 30% of men and 40% of women have a sexual dysfunction. Intimacy is challenging.
Yeah.
People struggle.
I know. When I've seen those numbers, and I've been involved much more on the percentages who have sexual dysfunction, who have a problem.
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing that anybody has good sex.
That's what I say to people. It's too funny because I say the same thing. It's amazing we get along, the whole thing, because it is so challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing.
And what breaks my heart, actually, is how often I hear people say, you know, we're not going to be challenged with monogamy because we want this so badly, right. And we love each other. Yeah. And that makes logical sense. That's really the logic that most people head into a relationship with. Yeah. We love each other and we want this so bad we're not going to fail at it. Yeah. Nonetheless, about a third of people do fail at it. Yeah. And I think in part because people are being naive to ignore the fact that there are these impulses that will take you down the wrong path and create trouble. So, and it's very difficult, I think, today for couples not to cheat just because there's so many ways to do it these days.
Right. So where do those impulses come from? I know you look at this from an evolutionary point of view, right? Yeah. So what is it with those impulses?
So most mammals are simply not monogamous. Even the mammals that people think are monogamous, they have affairs. You know, they'll stray. They'll cheat.
Which
whatever.
mammals are we talking
Well,
about?
I'm thinking right now like birds. Like birds have this great reputation, but really,
Swans are supposed to mate for life.
Right. Yeah.
And
but you know, I don't. Each of these animals have different sort of mating habits, so I can't put them all into one category. But what I can tell you is we like to use them as examples of how monogamy works. But for the most part, they're not examples of how.
It's too simplistic.
It is way too simplistic.
Yeah, all these things, they never really work out that way.
Like one of them, I can't remember the type of ape. They supposedly like mate for life, but they live. They don't cheat, but they live in circumstances where there's no other ape around. So there's no chance of cheating. You know what I mean? So there are these kinds of exceptions that people aren't recognizing. But let's get back to people. So what this means is there's, for many people and not all, some people actually have a fine time with monogamy, no problem. So it is absolutely not a one size fits all model. Absolutely not. Yeah. But I would like people to recognize that even if they consider themselves easily monogamous, there very well could be a challenge for them down the road. And their best bet at dealing with it is keeping a dialogue with their partner about it so that they don't find themselves in the situation of having cheated, feeling so horrible, getting caught, whatever. I mean, like not dealing with it. This is definitely a case of when you don't deal with it, it's a much bigger problem than when you do deal with it.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the message. So, you know, your DNA isn't necessarily oriented toward one partner for life. And even if you don't feel it now, that's a challenge that might happen for you. So your best bet is to engage your partner like sort of together and work with it together. If you can find a way to make space to allow for some flexibility that doesn't feel hurtful, that might be a way, like with new tech the way it is, maybe VR porn or something is a way to create a little space so people have a little opportunity for variety.
So let me ask you something. So monogamy, people understand, I think, what that is, right? With one partner. The flip side of it, when monogamy doesn't work out, we call cheating. right? Or straying or whatever it is. But cheating has so many different definitions these days, right? It almost depends on who the person is and how they define it. And you can have two people in a relationship and they've got completely different ideas.
And that's usually the case.
So can you talk to that a little bit?
So people don't like to have these conversations with their partner because they know sort of deep down that there's going to be a disagreement about what's okay, what's appropriate.
Right.
Like so often in a heterosexual couple, he wants to, watch porn and she feels like that's straying.
Yeah. So is watching porn straying?
That is really a personal decision. There's nothing clear-cut about any of this.
There's no right answer to that? I thought you had the answer.
Don't you worry.
Wait, you're the professional here. Don't you have the answer? People want to know.
Yeah, they do. They do. And so they have to come to those conclusions by themselves. That's for sure. But
did you get clients where they disagree on what constitutes cheating, and they ask you to weigh in on what's the right answer?
Well, you know what? Yes, and when they do, what I try to do is work sort of like the middle ground there, because there isn't any definition of cheating really. I mean that most people could agree that like penile vaginal intercourse would be cheating, but people don't necessarily agree on what's going on online is cheating, whatever else. So I try to...
And even apart from sex, there's this concept of emotional cheating, right?
Right.
Emotional relationship with somebody.
Right.
How does that fit in?
Well, it's just another element of this very complex picture. So, there are just so many pieces to it. And I just really want to highlight that the message I think I would like people to take from today is that even if they want this so much, and so does their partner, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be challenging at some time. So don't fool yourself. A monogamous relationship can be tricky. So don't be naive.
Non-monogamous can be tricky too.
So tricky. I tell people there's no, exactly. I tell people there's no relationship path that is without risk.
I'm going to simplify.
Okay.
Relationships are tricky.
That's right. That's right.
Present company excluded, of course.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Relationships are tricky.
They are.
I say to my patients, I say, this is one of the most difficult things that human beings do.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
Everybody wants it. They want to be in a relationship, or the vast majority of people. And, and yet it's never simple, and it's not our romantic ideal of what a relationship is ever. Mm-hmm, right?
Mm-hmm. I would agree. Yeah. And so much of our emotional lives are wrapped up in what happens in that relationship. So it has so much to do with how we feel in our lives in general, and sexual satisfaction and monogamy, that's all a part of it. Yeah. So there's a lot at stake here.
Well, you know what I like about how you describe it is that we don't really think of ourselves as animals very much. But especially around sexuality.
Yeah.
There's a deep part of our brain that controls a lot of our urges and appetites and needs. And it's separate from the higher levels of our brain, the cortex, where we have consciousness and thought and thinking. And the drives, we manage our drives. Mm-hmm. We manage them. We may have terrific appetite, we may have terrific hunger, but if you're in a car ride or you're in the middle of a meeting and you can't eat, we have a way of controlling it. We're still hungry, but we have a way of controlling it, but they're in opposition to some extent.
Yes.
And I think sex, sex is comes from the deep part of the brain.
Absolutely. And, the fact that we like to ignore that is to everyone's detriment, because what happens is that more primal, animalistic kind of sex gets oftentimes channeled into like watching porn or whatever, away from the relationship. Yeah. And couples need that potent sexual energy to keep things interesting. Yeah. But if we ignore that we're animals and we don't make space for that in the bedroom, it is going to get channeled out, and sex is going to get boring, and all the hot stuff is going to go elsewhere. That's in nobody's best interest.
Thank you for listening to The Sex Doctors with Dr. Marianne Brandon and Dr. Abraham Morgentaler. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and tune in next time for more expert advice on sexual health and relationships.
thank you. I believe in miracles since you came along.